Alrighty. Okay. So I'm going to. I constructed this closing plenary during the conference based on thoughts of I think dopamine, and realized that what we all really need is a cortisol shot in our head to calm down after surge. There's a lot of thinking going on, and I was motivated by this blog post I read. I tweeted it about 4 or 5 days ago by Bert Craven, who I have no idea who he is. He drew this infographic basically that talked about how he thinks. He's like, I think a lot, and I can't figure out how I think. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to draw a pictogram of like an infographic of how I think. And I looked at it and I was like, well, shit, that makes a lot of sense. That is a really good representation of how I think, and it made me angry. About another book that I had read that I actually really love, and I'll get to that. It's called Drive. How many people here have read the book Drive? The surprising things, surprising information about what motivates us as people. It's a really interesting book. It has a lot of really interesting information in it. I had some alternate titles of this talk. Thought Workers, Romanticizing Ineptitude, which was there. Thought Workers, Shut Up and Build Something. That was one. And this one, just added now, highly appropriate. Thought Workers, Your Ideas Probably Suck. Squeeze bacon, what the fuck is that? Like someone was like, hey, squeeze bacon, that's what you should use on your slide picture. And I was like, that doesn't exist. Like anyone who has ever eaten bacon, let alone chocolate-covered bacon, would know you don't put that shit in a bottle. That doesn't make any sense. That's a stupid idea. Also, someone asked me to imitate Cantrell up here. I'm not sure I have enough agitation to do that at this point. So we'll see there. I think I can do it. I just have to have a moment. I have to get in the moment and do that. This book is a great book. I highly recommend reading this book. There's been some RS Animate series around it. There was I think it was a TED Talk around it. Some really interesting ideas about how human beings really aren't motivated to accomplish things based on money. And it goes beyond that, and how we narrow our focus when we solve problems if we are given a carrot, right? If I tell you to solve a problem creatively, and I dangle money in front of you, you tend to be less creative in solving that. And I was thinking for a long time on why I don't think that is, and I think it's probably because I'm a sociopath or something like that, where I'm looking at this problem and I'm thinking like, why wouldn't money motivate me? I can turn around and give it to a charity afterwards. Like I just don't understand that disconnection there. But what I realized was there is a very good reason why I don't care that I need to be motivated by a specific thing or that my vision narrows. We all have a problem where our vision will narrow. And you don't get to use an excuse when your vision narrows, right? Motivating by money it's just an example of that. Another is motivating by stress. Has anybody ever had like an outage? Right? An outage does the same thing to your mind as anything else. It narrows the focus. You do not get to think creatively during that. It's very, very difficult to think outside of the box when everything is burning around you, right? Thinking creatively of how to get outside of a burning building is probably not the best idea of getting. It's not how you get out. The other thing in this book that I found really frustrating was they talked about vacation and how vacation policies for employers. And this one always gets me riled up, so I may be able to even pull off some sort of Cantrell impersonation where I'm talking about employers, right? So like vacation days, right? Vacation days, they say vacation days don't have vacation policies. Employees, they should be able to. They're thought workers. They think better on their own. You don't want to structure that too much. You want to let them go out. You want to let them do what they need to do. They can show up when they want to show up. Just don't have a vacation policy, which I'm an employer, right? I run a couple of companies that are decent sized, and I'm thinking about that. I'm like, really? You can convince your employees to get screwed like that? That's awesome, right? I don't carry any liability for vacation days anymore, right? I have to accrue liability in the budget to pay everybody their vacation days when they get fired, or So like that doesn't work. That's awesome. I don't have to carry that liability. And all of the studies show that if I tell you to take off whenever you want, you're a human being, you're guilty, you don't take off. Right? If I give you 15, you're like, I got to use them. But if I say take off whenever, you're like, I got to get my work done. And every time that happens, right? So it's like, really, do you really want that? Because I don't think you do. I don't think you actually want that. It's much better to have 15 days of vacation or 25 days of vacation or whatever it is, and then say, I ran out, I really want another day. Because most reasonable employers would be like, oh, okay, let's work something out, But the idea of actually taking them. So it's really there's some counterintuitive things in the book. And it may not apply to all people, but I work with engineers. And it applies to all of the engineering companies I know, all the research I do. So more than anything, I'm not here to argue, which you would say, right? Yeah, you're always here to argue. But I'm here to challenge you about the way you think, or what you call thinking. So this pisses me off. This pisses me off all the time. This, in every leadership circle or business counseling, business advice, or consultants come in and they go, it's all about thinking. It's all about cogitating. You're just thinking about the right way to do it, and then you just go do it. It's like, what? Right? That doesn't make any sense. Execution is 9/10 of it, right? That doesn't make any sense. It always seemed like this to me, right? You're doing, and then you have that moment in the shower where you're like, fuck, I got it, right? And I don't know about you, you're probably pruned up, but if I spent 95% of my time in the shower, that would be really weird. So the more I thought about it, and I actually went back to, I think, ACM Turing winner Fred Brooks, who in his Mythical Man Month book said, well over half of the time you spend working on a project, on the order of 70%, is spent thinking. And no tool, no matter how advanced, can think for you. Consequently, even if a tool did everything except thinking for you, if you wrote 100% of the code, if it wrote 100% of the code, 100% of the documentation, 100% of the testing, it burnt the CD-ROMs, guess when it was written, put them in boxes and mailed them to your customers, the best you could hope would be for a 30% overall improvement of your productivity, because 70% of your time is done thinking. And that's an interesting quote. I would further it today, given the laziness of engineers, to say that it's not 70%, it's probably about 95% of the time. When you think about what your tools actually do for you, right? How many people here, I hope there's a lot of hands, how many people here with the appropriate amount of time and motivation could read C code and produce assembly? Right? Why the fuck would you do that? Right? You have a compiler, right? There are good reasons that you do that. Every time your compiler does it wrong. And I tell you what, you're not in there with a monkey with a stick when you're doing it. You're using your brain to do that. And the more I thought about it, I was saying, we have all these tools that do work for us. Like, I run a compiler, and that's always the excuse. It's like, what are you doing, dude? I'm waiting for a compile. Like, how many of you actually wait for a compile, right? You compile, but it's not like you just sit there and pick your nose. I might, but you're just looking at it. You're thinking about something else. You're always thinking in your job. You're thinking about how to improve things. You're looking at code. You're doing a code review. It's always something. You actually spend almost all of your time thinking. You're thinking in different ways is the problem. So all this thing's doers versus thinkers. In our industry, nobody does anything without thinking. When was the last time you did something that could really be done by someone with no education, formal or informal? Someone whose basic only skill is to shovel or sweep. Very little of the work that you could do happens that way. And which got me motivated to look at that pictogram, that infographic, and started to break it out. So we look in, and we've got these 5 different spokes on this system. And one of them is this innovative spoke. And this is the part that makes me angry at people. Because I hear all these people, not the guy who wrote the book, the thought worker aspect of it, but the people who repeat it and say, I'm a thought worker, I can work whenever I want. I mean, that might get my best ideas or whenever, right? You can't just decide, dude, I'm going to be innovative right now. It's It's really hard. You have to be crack-ass genius to do that, all right? And it's very, very difficult for us to elect to enter this sort of thinking mode, right? So this is it's the mode we want. This is why we want to work at 3 a.m., because we are most creative then. We want to work, we want to put our headsets on, we want to have the universe dissolve away from us, because we're most creative. But I'm going to try to provide some context around that so we can really appreciate what that is, because this is freaking magical, and this really only happens in the shower for me, and I don't take enough showers. So I take enough showers. I don't take 3 hours of showers a day. So good 20 minutes in the morning. It's good. So this other thing is conceptual. And this, I think, is what a lot of us think about as innovative when we're thinking we're being creative. We're not actually being creative. What we're doing is we're thinking in the abstract. We're thinking in concepts. We're thinking about how the parts of the computer work together. We're thinking about how shit works. When we look at our architectures, and hundreds of moving parts in this. We've got switches and routers, and we've got, not only that, we have middleware. We've got like 10 different daemons talking over local area network, and it's freaking crazy, right? And in order to think about that, it's very difficult to say, well, the first thing that happens is this instruction fires and this cache line blows, right? That's so concrete. We're actually thinking there's a box, and it's written in marker, and it's connected to this other box that's written in marker, and it goes through this dotted line, which is some sort of firewall. We think in these conceptual ways, and we apply a lot of patterns to that. And this is what we do when we talk to each other, because most of the time, unless we're actually debugging or extreme programming. So we spend a lot of our time working with each other in conceptual ways. And I think this is really useful when you get an education in computer science pretty much anywhere in the world. You leave with the ability to communicate in conceptual ways with other people. When they start to use the vernacular, when they start to draw things on the board, when they talk about how things work, the Lego blocks start to go together, right? And that's the conceptual aspect. It's not how the Lego is constructed and say, there's a 2 millimeter tolerance on the bottom of Legos, so we're pretty fucked when we build that, right? So you're not thinking about those things, you're thinking about the Legos. Then we have this realm, and this is the realm that you can't teach. This is intuition. This is what happens. Just like innovation, I said you can't elect to enter that state of mind. I would say that you cannot elect to leave this state of mind. It's something, this is your visceral response to everything. These are your feelings, engineers. Right? So your instincts, when things go wrong in production and you decide to run a command, most of the time it comes from a place of intuition. This just requires practice. It requires exposure and practice. It requires making mistakes and having the burn mark from the skillet on your hand. All of those things go into building one's intuition, right? It's why kids that fall a lot as kids fall better as adults, right? My kids should be great at that. So never underestimate the ability to execute or your will through a problem. So one of the most valuable things that I learned in school, it was probably in graduate school, was the ability to stare at a problem and to be defeated, to return to it with the same vigor, right? It kicked my ass, and yet I went and had a beer, and I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I went in for another ass kicking, right? I didn't decide, like, I'm going to do something else, right? I'm going to change tires for a living. I'm going to wrap burgers, You go in to solve a problem, and not all of those problems come to you in a single inspirational moment. But there is a way you can get there. And those are the other two, which I'll lump together and offend somebody, which are the bottom two quadrants, which are the practical and the critical thinking aspects. So I'm not sure that the infographic is perfect because I, after thinking about it, tended to conflate these two. But these are questioning things when they don't work. This is the part that you can elect to enter every single day that you work. Everything that you look at, every time you try to do something, especially when the building's not on fire or when someone's asking you some theoretical question, When you're coding, when you're checking something in, when you're doing a code review, when you're doing a packet analysis, when you're doing any of this, you are in these stages. You're moving back and forth between them. Why is this not working the way I expect it to? Why does the universe hate me right now? And then you plan to kill the universe, and then you move back to understand why you were unsuccessful. You just go back and forth between these two. And by practicing these two things, the thing that you earn is intuitive thinking. You earn the ability to execute. That's basically through experience. Through practice and expertise and knowledge comes experience. So we have this interview question, which probably doesn't apply to everybody at OmniTI, but the SREs probably will recognize this question, which is, how well would you say you perform when you are sitting in a moist chair? Right? That is that you're debugging something and then you just lost the second half of the mirror of your root on your core database server because you were troubleshooting losing the first half. Or all of the boot blocks on your file, or all the Uber blocks on your file system are gone. Or you have database corruption in Oracle and it's seg faulting and it's Oracle 8i. And no one will support you. Those questions usually, when you realize how much money is going away or how many jobs you could cost, you leak a little. And then you have to stay focused, right? So just pretend it's liquor and you had a drinking problem. It's good. So what I would say is that thought workers, we earn the right to execute in those other two realms by our election to execute well in these three. We choose to do this. We choose to learn our trade very well. We learn the technologies. We educate ourselves and provide an incredibly solid conceptual basis of what we're doing. And then we figure out how to solve problems and manage problems. Right? So we execute, and we execute, and we execute. And you don't get to have a creative 3 a.m. idea without being woken up some other night at 3 a.m. to execute on a critical thought, right? On a critical problem, like critical thinking in the midst of failure. How many people have come up with these, well, probably not in this room. I've seen a ton of brilliant ideas from people that were brilliant for one person and they didn't exist, right? By executing in these three realms, we expose ourselves to the problems that lead to innovative solution. I don't want the tool that was built by an academic to solve his theoretical problem. I want the tool built by an engineer who has the burn mark on his hand from the skillet, right? I mean, that is useful. I know the pain that he has. I know he's experienced it. He built it for a reason. And one of the things that that's really interesting here and why we are thought workers and I won't say that all other trades aren't. There are certain other trades that really aren't thought workers. I would say that like generalized construction, for example, if you're hammering nails and bending rebar, the act of doing that is really not thought work in a lot of ways. It doesn't require critical thinking skills. It does require expertise. There is a craft to it, there's a skill to it, but you can go and you can work for 6 hours and doing the same thing. It's like crimping the ends of wiring cables, right? I mean, how many people have done that? I've done that. Okay, you're not thinking while you're doing that. All right. If you are going to do it wrong, you've overthought the problem, right? So every bad crimp I've ever done, I was thinking about crimping. But one of the things that Brian said after, Brian Cantrell said after his tour of Unix corpses was that, the things we have a tremendous amount of permanence, right? When we go and we design something, we have this idea of building something, we don't ever really build anything, right? We're designing our stuff. People are like, don't design, you have to design before you write a line of code. What the fuck do you think writing a line of code is? It's design documentation. That's all it is. The compiler doesn't really even produce a product. It produces design documentation that can be read by a microprocessor. Not fires through the microprocessor, is it actually built, transient results go away, right? Which is why when you build a piece of software today, it will work exactly the same 15 years from now. It will not degrade like a bridge. It will not fall apart. And because this, we're always designing. We're always designing. All the things that we do are processes, right? So even when you're in there and you're doing coding and you're building an AVL tree for the 400th time, think about it as doing your scales. You're building memory muscle, you're learning, right? You are thinking doing that, you're not just doing. So that dude is you too, and you're a thought worker, and it's probably not a bad name. Don't let people around you use it as a bad name. Tried to get a Ravens one because we kicked the Browns' ass, but Orioles. We made the playoffs, right? I think. Yes. No. Oh, I'm talking to Paul. Anybody from Baltimore? Did Orioles make the playoffs? It's because the Yankees suck. All right. All right. So I hope you think more about the way you think. I found it pretty educational for the last 4 days while I was thinking about building these slides. More than that, I think that it's helpful to communicate this idea of thinking throughout your entire job, not thinking about any of it as rote labor, and communicating that to your colleagues for 2 reasons. One, to pick them up out of the dirt, but we all know that there's enough frickin' egos to go around that nobody's really in the dirt. The other is to take them down, this magical creative idea, like execute or get the fuck out, right? Building this stuff, the ideas that you're building, those ideas can be codified, and they're still ideas, and that's what has merit in our industry. And yes, thank you for coming to Surge. That's it? There's no more housekeeping, right?